Welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the NBA edition. We're back, fellas. I'm here, as always, with Jay Persson and Phan, and we are so excited to be back for some NBA pods. We're going to talk hoops. We're talking the Monday 11-7 slate of games, November 7th, and we're just stoked to be here and talk some hoops with you guys. Jay, what's going on?
How's it going, Brian? Yeah, it's good to be back, but I got to say I did enjoy my time off the pod because I didn't have to get out of bed ever, which is something I really like. There's nobody on this planet that's lazier than me, so I really enjoyed my time off in that regard, but at the same time, I am excited to talk hoops. I will say, though, I did get out of bed. This is a morning pod, which is brutal for me to move, and the first thing I hear from you on this pod is that there's a two-headed shark, and you asked me about it like I'm supposed to know first thing in the morning. So I don't know, man. Now, there's stuff in the back of my head now. Like, one head is enough to scare me, and I'm never going in the ocean again.
Yeah, Justin, first off, what's going on? Second off, did you hear about this two-headed shark? I was reading this Nat Geo article earlier about a two-headed shark they found.
I did not. So I'm not too worried about it because 6 months of the year, I don't leave my house during NBA season. So I'm pretty much covered for at least half the year. And yeah, that's pretty terrifying. And you got to be back on the pod though. And I feel like Will Byers coming back from the upside down. It's a typical Stranger Things thing.
Yeah, we're stoked to be back on. So just a couple show notes. We're going to do these a little bit different than we did last year. Last year we did them game by game, just solely game by game breakdowns. This year we're going to still include the game by game breakdowns. We're going to do. We're going to talk about the games that I think are the most important. We're going to talk the highest total, most interesting. We'll pick and talk about the ones that I think they're most intriguing, the most relevant to DFS, because we definitely want to talk hoops, and we definitely hear you guys that you guys enjoy that aspect of the show. But we also want to make it very DFS relevant. So we're going to go position by position as well. So we'll talk the 2 or 3 most intriguing games, and then we'll get into the positions, go to the point guard through center. We'll talk, who the chalk is, some pivots, interesting players. And I think this will be a good breakdown just to keep it at a manageable time. We're going to try to do these the day of, so it's relevant information and stuff you guys can use for that night's slate. So that's a tentative breakdown of how the show is going to go. But, as always, shoot us feedback. We are doing this pod, because we enjoy it, but also because you guys, asked for it. And you guys seem to really enjoy it. So we definitely appreciate that. We always appreciate feedback and your guys' thoughts on stuff. So, you can tweet us at FantasyLabs NBA, or you can send us an email at podcast@fantasylabs.com. You can shoot us, individual tweets. I'll get to those at the end of the show, but always appreciate feedback. So on that note, let's get into the show, guys. So we're talking the Monday, November 11th, November 7th slate of games, and we'll start off just touching on any quick injury news. Jay, can you handle that?
Yeah, I can. It's a really light injury slate. Nothing really big hanging out there. We have Roy Hibbert, who's out again. Hollis Thompson is probable. Marvin Williams is probably the one guy to keep an eye on. He's questionable with an illness, so that's something we'll monitor throughout the day. And then we have the most devastating news of the season and probably of the last 3 or 4 years outside of Tim Duncan retiring is Lance Stephenson getting brutally cut. So that's pretty heavy news. We'll get into that, I think, quite a bit, especially with this first game we're going to talk about. And then the last note is that Corey Brewer is drawing the start ahead of Eric Gordon tonight to match up with John Wall and provide Gordon with a spark off the bench in the second unit. And we can get into that a little bit too as well later.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, Jay. So, the 2 games that we're going to go over are the ones that have significantly the highest totals on the slate. So that's the Warriors versus the Pelicans and the Wizards versus the Rockets. The first game has a total of 222.5, and then Rockets and Wizards has 215.5. The next closest game is at 208. So these are definitely the 2 games with the most DFS goodness, as our friend Pete would say. So let's get into this. Let's talk the first one, which is going to be Warriors at Pelicans. And Justin, I think that you are pretty in tune with this team and the usage distribution, minute distribution, and just sort of what's going on. So I'll cut to you, just starting off with the Warriors. What are your thoughts early in the season? Obviously, KD's been great. We've seen some sort of slumpish stuff going on with Klay and Seth, but it's weird. It's not like a usage issue. It's just Klay just can't hit a shot. What are your thoughts on this Warriors team?
Yeah, I think they're still feeling each other out. It's still really early on, just trying to learn how to play off each other. I think in this particular game with the 17-point spread, it scares me off. A lot of these guys in cash. Kevin Durant's the only guy on FanDuel at 9,800 that I'm looking at and considering in cash. But on that site, on this slate, you have guys like Russell Westbrook, Harden, John Wall, Hassan Whiteside, big hitters that I'm probably going to favor over Kevin Durant and cash. So I don't imagine any Warriors ending up on my cash teams with the 17-point spread. I don't see really anybody getting enough run and providing enough of a floor with the minutes. And then, I think Durant still has that ceiling in this matchup where he can, hit 50 FanDuel points and, payoff value. But you kind of look at these other guys, Steph, he doesn't have that ceiling like he did in past years. I think in past years he didn't have KD there, dominating possession, taking a lot of shots. So I don't think that ceiling there for Steph is there anymore. I think Klay is interesting in tournaments. He is pretty highly rated on, my model and on FanDuel for shooting guard. But, there I'm still looking at guys like James Harden ahead of him. So I'm still kind of intrigued by Klay Thompson. He's been playing big minutes. Especially with them being down, Ian Clark and McCaw's questionable today too. So once that 3-point shot starts falling, which is going to happen pretty soon here, he's been getting good looks. It's not like, anything's really different this year for him. So once those shots start falling, we talked about this in the preseason pod. He was 125th in touches per game. He doesn't need the ball a lot. So once those shots start falling, I think he can have a big game. And, this is a decent spot to do it in. So I don't mind some Klay Thompson tournaments. But beyond that, I don't think I'm going to have a ton of exposure. Draymond Green, I think, is a guy we need to talk about too. I think he's in the mix as well. He's been really solid. Been picking up the rebounds, been picking up the steals and blocks, been focusing a lot more on defense in his new role. So he's a guy that's in the mix too. I like Draymond as my number one tournament play, and I like Klay, some Klay as well.
Yeah, Jay, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it seems Klay's, I think, sort of the most interesting guy in DFS right now, just because he's burned so many people. Like, everyone's just counting on that regression to come. If you look at his usage rate, you look at his minutes, like, everything's there to be the same Klay Thompson, but the threes are just not going in. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on him and Draymond and the rest of this team?
Yeah, on Klay, how I got to ask how serious you would think this question is of if Klay has made more three-pointers this season than TJ McConnell has free throw attempts, who would you take?
Oh, man. It's got to be Klay.
It's obviously Klay. It's statistically impossible to have less than TJ McConnell free throw attempts. But, yeah, right. Klay's in a spot. I mean, you look at this season so far, and the only good game he had that wasn't really a dumpster fire was against this Pelicans team. So, I'm willing to go him in tournaments. Like Justin said, it's only a matter of time before these shots start falling. With that said, though, I think the blowout concern is pretty big here for being one of the juicier games on the slate. I think there's value elsewhere. The two guys I'm looking at here are KD and Draymond. I definitely like tournament exposure to them on both sites, and then some to Klay as well. But, I'm just worried kind of about the ceiling there. I think they just have so many guys that they're all going to be racking up points if a couple of them are doing good, and that just means more higher likelihood of a blowout.
Justin, what are your thoughts on the Golden State defense? I mean, it was really poor. It was just maybe 3 or 4 days ago, statistically the worst defense in the league when you measure by points allowed per 100 possessions. It's been a little bit better lately. I think they're at 23rd right now, but I mean this is a little concerning. I mean, does it make you at least interested in on the other side? Some AD here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to play Davis in cash at all. I think tournaments is fine. I did minutes for the Pelicans, and Davis is the highest projected guy I have for minutes at 31.9 out of any Pelican. And I think given those minutes and given that blowout factor, it's tough to really go him. He did light up the Warriors last time he played, and he was shooting jumpers with ease that were double teams from Draymond and KD. I remember that. This Warriors team is not locked in defensively. They have tendencies to just space out and just let guys blow by and get easy looks right to the rim. It's very inconsistent so far, their effort on that end. And they have the defenders there. KD proved in the playoffs he could be a very good defender. Draymond's obviously very good. Clay's obviously very good. So they have the players. They just haven't been able to put it together. And I do like a lot of value on this Pelican side. Jay and I are back and forth on Langston Galloway and Buddy Hield. He seems to like Buddy Hield for some reason. We'll get into that a little later. I think Langston Galloway is pretty easy as a punt play on DK. I think he's min priced at $3K. And, given how he's been doing lately, how this game projects to go out to go and, extended minutes for the bench here. I see him playing 26 minutes and, seeing a good amount of usage against a questionable Warriors defense. So I think Galloway at, a 3K at point guard on DK is pretty easy. You can get into Buddy Hield for tournaments. Eachwan Moore's a guy that I think will draw a little interest, but for Eachwan, he doesn't do enough around the board, and I think he's really limited his upside to where you can kind of sneak him in cash potentially, but I think that's even thin. So Eachwan's kind of in an in-between spot for me where I don't think he's a strong enough cash play, and I don't think he has a tournament upside either. So those are kind of the guys I'm looking at on New Orleans.
Interesting. Any Terrence Jones, Jay, and what are your thoughts on those guards?
Yeah,
Tim Frazier too. We got to talk about Jones and Frazier.
Yeah, so last time these guys played, Anthony Davis, like you said, went off against double teams, dropped 45 and 17. Tim Frazier had a huge game, 21, 6, and 10. Then my man Lance, RIP, dropped a 15-8, 6 line off the bench. So, you look at that, and I think that presents a lot of upside for these guys. I obviously don't think that will duplicate. But, yeah, Terrence Jones is a guy. I was going to ask you guys what you would rather prefer him for tonight, to start or come off the bench. But what's more appealing to you guys?
I'd rather him come off the bench given the way this game projects, but I think he's at 4,400 on FanDuel at power forward. He's one of the best plays there. I don't think you have to overthink it. I think he's pretty you're going to see a lot of these Pelicans guys kind of finish in like the 25 to 30-minute range where they're all going to play similar minutes. Dante Cunningham is going to come back. He's going to be in the mix. They have Buddy Hield, and all these guys are going to kind of finish in that range. So I think Terrence Jones is fine, on FanDuel especially.
Yeah, but that spread makes it tough for cash games here.
Not for my man Buddy Hield though. I'll drop some knowledge on you guys. In the last 2 games, Lance took 30 shots, and Buddy Hield took 29 in the last 2 games. So I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that without Lance now, that means 100% definitively that Hield is taking 30 shots today.
Jay Sean, I'm gonna drop some knowledge on you. Buddy Hield's PER this season is 6.
We don't care about PER in DFS.
He's shooting 32. Yeah, but he has to shoot an obscene value given he's shooting 32% from the field, 21% from 3. So he needs 30 shots to really get in the conversation here.
I'm cool with that. Hey, who has a higher usage rate this season between Buddy Hield or Paul George? It's Buddy Hield.
Oh my gosh.
That's
fair. I'm fine with Buddy Hield in tournaments. I think it's fine because there's going to be a lot of usage that needs to go around because they have a lot of dead weight on this team. Ashik and Cunningham, like a lot of players in the rotation now can't score, can't do anything. Mm-hmm. So they need guys who can shoot the ball, and I don't know. I want to drop one more thing. I think with Lance off the court this season, limited sample, Galloway's seen his usage rate increase by 50%.
Yeah, I think you look at those two. Galloway is probably the guy on DK you consider in cash kind of strongly, and you play off this spread too, and things kind of look positive for these bench guys. So, obviously I think Hield's only a tournament play. You take a few shots on him, hoping he shoots above 20%. True shooting percentage or whatever. And then Galloway's the probably safer guy for cash at min price.
Gotcha. Yeah, Galloway's a good call. I wrote an article, I think it's a week or 2 ago about weighted usage rates, and your example of Hield to Paul George is exactly why I wrote it. Usage rates can be a little misleading there. Interesting before we move on, Anthony Davis against the Warriors. He's played 10 games since 2014. He has exceeded DK value by an average of 6.18 points per game, he has hit value in 80% of the games, so 8 of those 10 games. You take out one sort of subpar, which he scored 32 DK points, he's been like at 50 or higher in every other game. So or 80 rather. This seems like not a good matchup because of the Vegas spread here, but he has a extensive history at this point, 10 games of playing really well against them. So definitely a guy I think that you want to have some tournament exposure to, even if you don't want to go on the cash.
Yeah. The problem with AD on the slate is there are a lot of good guys or expensive guys in good spots, so it's just tough to fit him, especially at DraftKings. You're going to have to really pick your spots with some of these top prices. You have Harden as well, Russ,
right,
John Wall. I mean, there are a lot of guys. So that's another thing. On maybe different slates, I'd like him a bit more, but it's tough to fit him in.
I think this is the lowest percentage owned you're going to get AD in tournaments all year, though. He's kind of disappointed recently. I mean, he hasn't been that dominant self that we saw the first 2 games, and he's in this spot with a 17-point spread. So I think this is a good
on the road,
I mean, this is probably, like I said, as low as ownership you're going to get on AD in a tournament all season, probably.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well said. Okay, let's move on to this other game. This will be the other game that we discussed before we quickly hit on positions here. The next game is going to be Rockets Wizards. Interestingly, it opened at a 219 total, but it's since come down to 215.5. So pretty big movement in that regard.
Corey Brewer.
Yeah, probably. So
he's not dropping 50 tonight.
You never know. The Warriors, the Wizards, gosh, they're so close. The Wizards are 1.5 point favorites. So this game projects to be fairly high scoring and maybe a little bit close. So I think there's a lot of interesting plays here. We talk at the top with Harden and Wall, are seemingly in good spots. So Jay, I'm curious your thoughts, but I think an interesting storyline here is that, we expected Houston to play at just a ridiculously fast pace this year. That was sort of their thing, is they're going to be so bad defensively and they're going to play at such a high pace that you just really want to target guys against them all the time. They've been bad defensively. Through the year, they're 28th on defense. They've allowed 109.2 points per 100 possessions. That's 28th. Yeah, so it's really, really bad. But as far as pace goes, they're only sort of middle of the road. I think below average.
17.
Yeah. So it's not like they're playing at some ridiculous pace. So I'm curious, if you think that people are just still assuming that this is just such a super fast team, or if you think they're going to be more fast paced as the year goes on, or what are your thoughts on that? Because it sort of is interesting when you're talking DFS value and trying to project how many possessions these guys are going to play.
Yeah, I was surprised to see they were 17th in pace. I definitely think that's the thing that will normalize as the season progresses. They're a Mike D'Antoni offense. They're definitely going to push the ball. So I think the more we see them, that pace will quickly jump up a bit. The Wizards also are playing at a pretty slow pace as well. That might be why the total dropped. But you look at the total, I think I factor that in more than the pace of these teams 5 or 6 games into the season. And, this is juicy. It's a close spread. So it's not really getting me off any of these guys, although it is kind of surprising to see where they rank. But, I think this game is definitely the game you want to target. We can start with Houston. I think the first thing you want to talk about is Corey Brewer starting above Eric Gordon and what that does. And a lot of people are on John Wall today, and I don't know who out there thinks Corey Brewer is still good defensively, but in the last 3 years, in small forward rankings for defensive real plus minus, he's 28, 39, and 32. So I think this is more of a way of Houston saying, we don't have anybody that can stop John Wall, so
right.
The only guy we think can. Beverly's out, so it's nothing that's going to scare me off.
At least he's got some length, I think is maybe their thought.
Yeah, but he's not going to go full minutes really, either heavy minutes to where he's going to be on Wall the whole game or anything. And I still like Wall a lot, but more importantly, I think Eric Gordon off the bench. I like him a lot in tournaments now with that second unit. He should put up a nice selection of shots with Harden, maybe resting, and Gordon's in there. So he's a guy I'm looking at in tournaments out of this news quite a bit. And
his ownership will seemingly go down because people just sort of naturally, Corey Brewer starting for Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon's off my radar. I can't play a guy who doesn't start,
I think that's one of the biggest leaks and mistakes that people generally make in DFS is just assuming that a starting position is better than a bench role. Not really factoring the usage effect that going in the starting lineup maybe means 2 or 3 more minutes, but it means that a lot less usage and a lot less involvement within the offense and a lot less counting stats as a result. So I just wanted to throw that in. I wanted to talk about Wall real quick. I have, John Wall at home. We know 47.4 DK points last year exceeded salary-based expectations at 3.4 points on average. John Wall on 2 days rest last year, which is coming off 2 days rest after sitting out the second leg of a back-to-back, averaged 21.8 points per 36 with a 52% effective field goal percentage. So on 0 to 1 days rest, that 52% came down to 46%, and the 21.8 points per 36 came down to 19.9. So we get a rested John Wall at home here against Houston. I'm really liking the spot. I'm going to be heavy on him. I think he's one of the top cash game plays of the slate. And on the opposite, we can go to the opposite side of the ball in a little bit, but I want to talk about Bradley Beal too, shooting guard, and Markieff Morris at power forward. Those two guys intrigue me. We can start off with Morris because I think it's going to be, small forward, power forward. We were looking at FanDuel. Jay and I were talking about this last night about, if you play him. I think he would end up on my initial version of cash game teams, mostly because, this new pattern, substitution pattern that has been implemented last 2 games where he's getting pulled early in the first quarter and then coming in to anchor that second unit. Seeing a really big bump in usage during that stretch. It only adds more appeal to his value. And these Washington Stars have been playing heavy minutes lately. I mean, they've haven't been shy about putting these guys out for 36, 38 minutes. And coming off, it's not a back-to-back. They had a day of rest, and I think this is a spot where these guys offer upside too with minutes. I mean, conservatively in my models, I put these guys, around 33 to 36, but I can easily see them going 37, 38. So Markieff Morris, I think, is firmly in consideration as a cash game play, and Bradley Beal at shooting guard. I think Beal and Hart are kind of the guys that stand out initially early on as the plays there. So there's still plenty of goodness to go around. Any interest in Gortat at all? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I like Gortat. I mean, if you look at the center position, and we'll get more into this. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you have Whiteside going against OKC, who's been really good defensively, especially down low with Steven Adams getting the start. You have
Embiid.
But honestly, Embiid might be the best, one of the best options at 24 minutes. So if you're looking at those, Drummond's going against I think the Clippers are first in defense so far this year, just been really solid in that regard. Rudy Gobert's in the super low total game against the 76ers, and he's been sort of the end this year. So if you're looking at it, I mean, Gortat at 5'9", especially on FanDuel, where he's got a 90% bargain rating and high projected plus minus, that's not that bad, honestly.
Yeah, Gortat's a great tournament play. We just mentioned everybody's going to be on Wall, Beal, and Markieff. So you kind of pivot and go Gortat. I think he'll be under-owned a bit, although I do like this entire starting five. Markieff with the rotations, for me, he's penciled in at small forward on DK, and then with the power forward position on FanDuel going too. He's locked in there for me as well with the new rotations playing the entire second quarter. So the minutes are huge. You look at Markieff even. And he's put up 36 and 34 DK points in the 2 games with this new second unit role, and he shot 10 for 26. So yeah, he's a very volatile player throughout his career, and he does have downside, but I don't really see it in this role right now and in this matchup. So Beal's another guy I think is probably underpriced a little bit tonight, and another guy you just look at this total that you plug and play. But Gortat for me is kind of the intriguing guy, and you're right, the center position. A lot of these guys have downsides. Embiid on DraftKings isn't as easy as maybe on FanDuel where he's 5,200 or whatever. And then, a lot of these top guys have tougher matchups or low totals. So Gortat stands out to me a lot as a nice turning pivot.
I also mentioned on FanDuel, I don't mind a little Otto Porter in tournaments as well. FanDuel small forward is a little tougher. I always have KD at the top. You got PG is a good tournament play, 8,600. Gordon Hayward at 73, and then it becomes a little open after that. You can talk me into Justice Winslow at 5K. CJ Miles has been doing well at 42, but Otto Porter, I'm projected right now for 30.9 minutes, and I think that's really conservative, just because I don't know how much some of these guys, if they go small, if they go, they've been throwing around some different looks where Porter's minutes have been up and down. But if he can hit 34 to 36 minutes, which I think is realistic, he could definitely pay off in this game. And we know Ryan knows really well how poorly Houston's defended small forwards with Ariza in years past.
Yeah.
I think that's changed at all. So Otto Porter is a guy in this spot that I'm going to have some interest in tournaments on FanDuel.
Yeah, Reese is one of those guys that has the defensive reputation, but just hasn't been good in years. If you looked at any of his advanced analytics on defense, they've just been really poor. So I think we all agree that there's a lot of fantasy goodness here, especially on Washington's side. We like a lot of these guys, and I think a lot of it is just they're sort of just lower priced than what we would expect for this game and their minute totals lately. So all of those guys are interesting. We love Harden, obviously, in this matchup as well. But I think the more interesting thing to talk about, just actually getting into slate-specific talk is, like how do you juggle all these guys? Because I'm looking at the fan model right now. We have Gortat has a top 3 projected plus minus. Markieff is I'm looking on FanDuel. Markieff has the highest projected plus minus among power forwards. Porter is top 6. Beal is second in projected plus minus behind Harden, and then Wall is second in projected plus minus behind Westbrook. So if you have a model that's very value driven, especially for cash games, you might end up with 3 Wizards. So Jay, I'll kick to you. Like how many Wizards are too many, and how would you rank these guys?
I don't think any amount of Wizards is too many, other than the max of 4. So I think it's a spot for me where I look at some of these low total games. A lot of it has to come down to pricing too. Like you mentioned, these guys are just underpriced. I think it's Gortat's the guy for me where you really look at center on FanDuel, and that's a spot where Embiid is really cheap, and he's a top 5 player in the league already. So you can maybe get away from Gortat there. But I think Wall, like you said, with this full rest, he's in a spot where you have to go him. Markieff is just you have to go him in cash on both sides as well. So I think you're looking at Otto Porter at small forward if you don't pay up for KD and you don't really like Winslow too much there. And, you can play a Porter there, and then Beal's in kind of the same spot, probably better. I would rank them probably Markieff number 1 just because of his price and position, Wall number 2, and then probably Beal 3, Gortat 4, and then Porter 5.
Yeah, I would echo those rankings. I think a lot of it comes down to roster construction as well. For me, the top dog on DK is Harden. I think that's the guy I want to fit in. The top dog on FanDuel is Westbrook. So you look on DK where you're fitting in Harden. I don't think you need to play Bradley Beal on DK, for example. So it comes down to just making these rosters and figuring out, you have these positions, you have these studs, and then kind of filling out your roster from there and seeing how many Wizards kind of fit in your roster construction and go along with, your positions and the types of players you have filled in already.
Fair enough. And so I think we're on the same page there. On Houston's side, we love Harden. We like, Gordon coming off the bench. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more else there. All these guys just aren't playing huge minutes like Harden is. So, you have Capella, who's projected for in the low 20s. And then, Brewer, I don't think is particularly interesting in his usage rate, even with the high minute total. So I think that's about it. Any last thoughts before we, jump into these positions real quick?
No, I think that's trappy. I think I don't really like any of these guys. I think Ryan Anderson might get pulled for like KJ. I don't know, something. He's gonna get just destroyed on defense. And that one game he got pulled early for KJ McDaniels. I think Markeith's just gonna have a big game against Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, the one thing I guess is just roster James Harden. I know he's expensive, but you got to get him in there.
Dude, this is true point guard James Harden, where he's actually 100% running the point, no question about it. Averaging 12 assists per 36 this year compared to 7 last year. It's crazy.
He leads the NBA in assists per game.
Yeah, it's insane. And in this fast-paced game where a lot of points are going to be scored, double-digit assists are very, very, very likely.
Yeah, it's not crazy to say from a playmaking perspective, Harden's been the best point guard in the league so far, just from a playmaking, not counting defense, not anything, just ball distribution, playmaking, running the team offenses. He's been the best. So, all right, let's get into our positions. So the way we're going to do this is we're just sort of like if you listen to the NFL Flex Pod, we're just going to go through point guard, through center, and just we'll hit on who we think is going to be the chalk, and I'll ask for a potential pivot off that. So it might be a high-priced guy or just a guy you think might be low-owned. And then maybe just another interesting player if a guy really stands out to you. So we'll do it like that, and this will just give us a way to make sure we're not missing any guys in our analysis. I think most of the DFS goodness is in those two games that we just talked about. A lot of intriguing guys, especially Washington side. I think we're really high on that team today. So we definitely wanted to spend more time on that, but we'll just go through positions to make sure we're not missing stuff. So Jay, I'll kick to you to start. Point guard, we obviously have Westbrook and Wall at the top. I assume that you think they're going to be the chalk. They have the highest projected plus minus. Do you have a preference of those two? And where would you go if you weren't going one of those two?
I think on DK, you look at Wall pretty strongly there and plug him in. Really hard to fit expensive guys on DK anyways, unless you're going Galloway and Buddy Hield, for example. On FanDuel, I like Russ quite a bit here, but I still, I think Wall at 92 I'm still fine with. And I think another chalky play will be George Hill at just 6K against Philly. One thing with Utah, they're on their third game in 4 nights. This is a very low total. One thing with Philly, I think people haven't realized this season is they have taken a step forward defensively. Robert Covington's a guy in mind who lost. I think he traded in his shot for some defense. This is a team that hasn't really been getting killed defensively, and this total is so low. The Jazz play at the 30th pace in the league, so it's a spot I think maybe Hill might not be as solid as he has been, but at 6K he's still up there. So I think those two will kind of anchor some teams. I certainly think Russ will have a lot of exposure as well. The guy I'm intrigued in, kind of more as a pivot, is Kemba at home here. Been incredibly consistent this year. Him and Batum. Actually, I was going through some consistency of guys, and these two have to be like number 1 and number 2 this season in terms of consistency. Just every game around the same. But I like the upside he has here with playing against the Indiana defense has been really bad this season.
Yeah, those are good calls. Yeah, Kemba's interesting as well. Another guy I'll mention, and I'll kick to Justin for his thoughts on point guards, is Dragic. He's playing against the Thunder. They have a really good defense, so they sort of scare people away. But if you actually, I'm looking at our trends tool, and this is something I wrote in an NBA breakdown. We have these NBA breakdowns every day up on the site, so definitely check those out. The Thunder have held every position below salary-based expectations except for point guard. My theory here is that Westbrook's crazy usage rate, he just sort of coasts on defense a little bit, which is understandable. That's not a knock on Westbrook. I think it's sort of become a story that he's not a good defender, which is fine. But I think it's interesting because people, and you look at the ownership on these guys against the Thunder, it's been pretty low. So I think everyone's sort of scared off guys against the Thunder, where point guard might be the sneaky spot to actually target guys against Russ. So Justin, I'll kick to you. Any interest in Dragic, Kemba, and where else are you looking?
Yeah, I mean Kemba, the Kemba Batum together. We know what we're gonna get from those two, especially at home. They've been very consistent overall. I think you guys covered pretty much the guys I'm looking at. Chris Paul, I got to shout out him. Still woefully underpriced at 8,500 on DK. This game scares me a little bit because I think it's like a 9-point spread or something like close to that. 8.5. Yeah, 8.5 point spread. And I like Chris Paul only in spots where I think he can get 30 plus minutes. And those games where he's seen 30 plus minutes, he's been pretty much more or less a lock for 40 plus DK points. So I think if this game stays relatively close, I can see him putting up 42 to 44 DK points and returning pretty good value here. Some deep guys, if you want to get weird. Tyler Johnson's been balling out. He's been putting up some massive lines. Gotta shout him out. And that's about it. I don't think there's a ton of deep value here at point guard.
Yeah. We can go back to Galloway. We'll bring him up again, I guess.
Yeah.
Where are you guys at with him on DK of putting him in your guard or utility spot?
Yeah, I think I mentioned Galloway being at 3K being pretty easy. I think that's going to be a super shock. I don't think that
Right.
that's going to be, that's something we need to get into and justify too much. The guy I'm still looking at on FanDuel that is interesting that I want at least, if I'm building 100 teams, I probably want at least 2 to 5, somewhere around there, of Tim Frazier. He's still decently priced at 5,400. I think people have been burned by him. He's not going to be very highly owned, 17-point spread. So this is still a spot where they're thin now in that backcourt. They need to play Galloway at the 2, the off guard a lot more. So, Frazier should see good minutes in this one. Just because they're a little short on the rotation. So I'm still intrigued by him, even though he's been a little bit of a disappointment. I think, he's some guy you want a tiny bit of exposure to.
In tournaments, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's way too volatile for cash. But yeah, I agree on Galloway and all those guys. So good thoughts there. Let's move to shooting guard. And so I'll kick back to you to start this one. I think we're pretty much in agreement that Harden is the nuts. If we look at just opponent plus minus for just this season, the Wizards have been the worst team to get shooting guards. They have allowed 5.6 points above expectations on DK. So now they have to face the toughest shooting guard in the league. So this could be a huge game for Harden for sure. So I think we like him. We like Beal. We've actually talked about a lot of these shooting guards. I'm actually curious, Justin, your thoughts on D Wade, better 3-point shooter than Klay Thompson this year.
It's really sad.
Yeah. Justin, we've lost Justin's sound. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. I don't have any.
Lost his voice of that stat.
Yeah.
just in shock over here. I'm not playing D-Wade at all today. I think if I want an exposure to Chicago, I'm looking at Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson.
Yep.
The guys at the top here at shooting guard are kind of like Evan Fournier, Batum, Rodney Hood on FanDuel at 5,400. Those are the kind of guys I'm looking at. Rodney Hood has been really consistent, and he actually did really well last game with
Hayward.
Hayward back playing big minutes and scored a lot too, and that whole starting 5 did really well. But I think this is a spot where he's gonna take a bit of a step back, and how big of a step back is kind of my question. What I'm wondering, I think I could see him putting up 22, 23 FanDuel points. I'm projected around 25 right now, but he profiles as much more of a tournament play for me. Just this spot in general for Utah in the second leg of a back-to-back on the road, it's not a spot I generally like to attack in general. So Hood, Klay Thompson, more tournament options for me. Batum, I'm fine with always in cash just because he's so consistent, especially he's playing at home today. So I'm good with him too. And other than that, you can talk me into a little. We covered Etuan Moore earlier on DK. I think he's going to be fairly popular, but he just. I don't know. I'm not enamored by his game overall. I think he can have a good game, but I'd much rather go to the Galloway well at 3K at the min instead. So other than that, Dion Waiters' revenge game. I talked about this.
Yeah.
They're playing OKC today. Deep flyer, just in tournaments only. Not gonna go crazy there. And then let's see here. What else do we have here? Jay mentioned Eric Gordon earlier, which I'm fully on board with. I got to shout out CJ Miles too. Been playing really well off the bench. More minutes stability now with Stuckey injured. He's been playing, around 22 minutes pretty consistently. And he did benefit last game a little bit from Paul George just kicking the ball into some girl's face in the stands.
The best ejection in the last 5 years, probably.
But I think he's still a good tournament play. Some guy that can erupt for some big guys for sure.
Interestingly, so I mentioned the Wizards are the worst team at shooting guard so far this year. Second worst team, the Charlotte Hornets. So the CJ Miles call may not be a bad one for tournaments. They've allowed 4.3 points over expectations to DK shooting guards on the year. So that one's definitely intriguing if you're looking sort of large field GPPs where you got to be contrarian. Yes, some miles. I don't hate that as well. Jay, what are your thoughts? Any last ones on this position?
Yeah, I just want to echo the Dion Waiters revenge game. I think everybody's all up in arms over Kevin Durant coming back, but this is the real revenge game. I mean, Waiters, I don't think Kevin Durant ever banked Kyrie Irving, gave him a black eye, but Waiters did. So the revenge is real in this one. First game back, so we can see a show. But really, I think I look at DK and in some, you make 100 lineups. In some regards, you might fade Harden on a few. I don't know if that's a great idea, but it's contrarian. And you look at a guy who's making his third straight eligibility as shooting guard in George Hill on DraftKings, so multi-position. So I think he's in an interesting spot to put in the shooting guard position, make for some unique roster construction. And then a guy to echo off your CJ Miles love is Monta Ellis. We'll get into Paul George here next. Obviously, there's the downside of him punting a ball in the stands again, but I think Monta is in a spot where we could see a slightly higher usage rate today, and nobody's really on him on DraftKings. I think he has a pretty cheap price at $5,400, so he's a guy I would consider with some tournament exposure.
Yeah, fair enough. And just looking at our on-off tool, which is free, so please go check it out. It's pretty cool. I just queried, how Rodney Hood did last year with Gordon Hayward on the floor. He did see, less minutes as to be expected, and slightly less usage, but his true shooting usage and all his efficiency metrics were up. So definitely, I don't think it's a hot take to say the Jazz are better with Gordon Hayward, but Rodney Hood also gets a bump just individually with his metrics. So you might see a usage decrease, but might get some more open shots as well. So it could end up being a sneaky guy for sure. All right, let's move to small forward. And Jay, I'll kick back to you. We talked about Durant. I think this is sort of a really interesting position because Durant, has such a high ceiling. On FanDuel, he has a 61.9 ceiling, which is, like 15 points higher than any other player. You have George, who has been a little up and down. You have Jimmy, who's interesting. And then you have Hayward returning, played a lot of minutes and got to the foul line a lot, was pretty aggressive in his return. But interesting, you have Winslow down at the bargain bin with a high projected plus minus. This is sort of interesting. It's easier in some of the other spots with some of the studs, but small forward is always a tough position. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, it's actually really tough today, and thankfully Markieff is small forward eligible on DK, and that's kind of why I'm locking him in that spot because it's someone I feel really good about. On FanDuel, it's a lot tougher. You guys start too. And I think it's really hard to fit KD in there. You obviously like to, just with the upside disparity between him and the next few guys and kind of that floor that he provides, even if with a 17-point spread, it's pretty solid. So he's a guy I'm initially looking at in that I want, but it's a guy realistically with going Harden, Wall, that might be a little bit tougher. On FanDuel, I think you can still potentially get away with it, but that's assuming, you fade Russ and Anthony Davis too. So I think you look at guys like we mentioned, Otto Porter provides, great value at that cheap price. Justice Winslow's been playing big minutes, seen his usage rate increase immensely, but he still can't shoot. So it's a tough spot to really rely on him too much. And then I think you get into some more tournament plays, like you mentioned with Jimmy Butler, CJ Miles, especially, been balling out lately. You kind of go down the list. A guy I'll bring up when you look at DraftKings, for me, it's still going to be Markieff at that small forward spot. But the guy I think a lot of people will go is Paul George, who's been severely underpriced on DraftKings. He's 7,900, and he's been solid. And I think what a lot of people do is look at how players have done against that team historically, especially the last year. I think that's something people might not take into consideration too much is how much other people look at that. You look at Paul George, he averaged 54.25 DK points against the Hornets last year. You look at his price, you might want to throw him in. But Brian, as you know, MKG didn't play in those games. Mm-hmm. We have MKG today. He's a lockdown defender. Small forwards have not done well against him this season. So Paul George is in a spot for me that I'm probably going to fade a lot more than most people. And that's kind of why I like Monta a little bit in tournaments. But, I think MKG puts fear in opposing small forwards. And this isn't a great spot for PG.
Yeah, I think that shooting guard stat, that I gave about the Hornets, I think it's almost, we talk in the NFL about funneling defenses where a defense is really good at against the pass versus the run, and it just sort of funnels action that way. It's almost sort of been the same thing with the Hornets, where MKG has been so good defending small forwards in that wing that all of the action has gone to the other wings. And so it's just been, a lot of the usage and the stuff has gone to the shooting guard as opposed to the guy on MKG. So, yeah, I like that thought. If you like Monta Ellis and CJ Miles, that maybe you downgrade Paul George a little bit. So Justin, what are your thoughts on these guys? Are you okay with maybe a Winslow Porter combo on FanDuel?
I think that's probably my early cash game look right now. I don't think I'm going to pay up for KD. We'll see. Other than that, I'm not going to play Ariza. CJ Miles is probably better suited for tournaments. Jimmy's fine. Just a interesting price point at 75 if you can make that work. It's not cheap enough where you can save up and pay up for studs, but it's expensive enough where it might cost you some people. So Jimmy's in the mix at 75 for sure. I'm not really on Marcus Morris against the Clippers. We mentioned their defense really being tough. He's going to have to go up against Bob Mute. MKG. I think Corey Brewer's a trap. You don't want to play him even though he's starting. People are going to just be gravitated towards him. He's going to have inflated ownership. So Corey Brewer's game is not conducive at all to right now to DFS. So I wouldn't really go him anymore. Beyond that, it's tough, man. It's really tough. I think DK small forward, you get Batum there at small forward eligible too. Which makes it even easier. It's unfair how easy DK small forward is compared to FanDuel. So FanDuel, I think the biggest challenge would just be small forward. I think Otto and Winslow give you the biggest combination of savings plus floor.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely fair. And we will say, like, please don't fade Kevin Durant, like, completely in tournaments. Like, the only reason that we're off of him in cash is just the 17-point spread is massive. You could just see abbreviated minutes in this game. So there's no denying that he has a massive game, potential to put up a lot of points. But, I think we're saying that it's tough in cash with just the minute volatility with such a large 17-point spread.
I think you could fit him, really.
You could, yeah, you could. FanDuel's a little bit easier, sure. Yeah. So we're not saying don't play KD, but we're saying that we're okay if you want to go down to Porter Winslow for sure. All right, let's move to power forward. We'll keep on trucking. We talked about Davis. I think we should probably talk about Blake. We talked about Dre in that game, but Blake Griffin, I think, is the guy that's interesting. Going against Detroit's. Projected for a good number of minutes, high usage rate. And then I'm also curious, and Jay, I'll start with you. If Marvin isn't able to go to Charlotte, what does it do? Are you looking at some Frank the Tank?
I
don't think so, man. That all-white front court.
I got to talk about this.
I hate that front court.
Okay, because I do models every day, have to run through the models and make sure everything looks good. And every freaking day, like I see like 5 white Charlotte frontcourt players high on the model because they're so cheap. It's like I bump one down and there's another one pops up. It's
and they keep going.
They're like Plumleys. They just never go away. It's like an endless stream of them.
The whack-a-mole, you just can't get rid of them.
It's horrible. Like Hansbrough is going to come back one day. It's set in stone. Yeah, it's terrible. I will say, though, with Hibbert already out, and if Marvin does miss with an illness, which I don't think he will, I would put him more probable than doubtful. But, I think it opens some stuff up in a spot where, for me at least, none of the high-priced guys stand out too much at power forward. I think Terrence Jones is certainly interesting. For FanDuel, Markieff is a lock. Yeah. So you have that one additional spot. And, I think there's going to be value popping up if Marvin misses. So that's something you got to look at. It's just going to figure out which white guy you're cool with going here.
So you gotta go Frank the Tank if
it's got to be Frank, right? Yeah.
I mean, let's see. Yeah, it's got to be Frank the Tank because he's presumably going to start at forward. You got Haas and Zeller splitting minutes at center with Hibbert gone, so they're going to start Kaminsky then slide MKG down to the 4 a lot, I imagine. And if Marvin's out, so Kaminsky's going to be really tough.
I hope this doesn't happen.
Yeah, I really do too, because I don't love rostering any of those guys particularly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Frank's, just like his points per minute mark, I don't think it's a guy. Even if he gets the start, he's projected for high number of minutes that mark. But I don't think it's a guy like you just absolutely have to lock into cash. But it's definitely a guy you got to look at in tournaments.
Yeah, he might be on this slate if that happens. Interesting thing with Blake is that the Clippers defense has been number 1 this year. The Pistons has been number 3. So it's a spot. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to break down because you want Chris Paul and Blake in these close games, these tough games. They get more looks. They're obviously really, really good. So in that regard, I like them a lot. You look at DK, Chris Paul's massively underpriced still. You look at the defensive rating of both teams, kind of say, okay, I might fade these guys, but they provide a lot of tournament value for me in that this game might be really close, and that means a lot of minutes for these guys, and they produce a lot of minutes. It's kind of as simple as that. As far as cash games, I'm not looking at Blake too strongly.
Justin, do you have any thoughts on Blake? He's sort of the guy that it's tough. I mean, you can get interested in Davis. You can Markieff is a step down from that. Blake's in that weird in-between spot that he might be a leverage play in tournaments just because you would assume that his ownership's going to dip.
I'll say real quick, Blake's probably a lot more in play on DK. Both those guys, Chris Paul, are underpriced.
Double bonus too. He's 8K on DK and 85 on FanDuel. Yeah. I'm fine with Blake. Just in tournaments though, I'm not going to cash him. He's kind of the same thing with what was I talking about earlier? That was kind of in between where he's too expensive. He's going to cost you some players and
Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler, exactly. Yeah, he's kind of in that spot where it really comes down to roster construction, what value opens up, what players you're comfortable with punting. Because if you play some of those mid-range guys, it's going to cost you a stud or two potentially. Yeah, Blake's fine. I think Blake and CP3 are both in play as tournament options, assuming this game can stay close.
Okay. I mean, is there any other guys that we're looking at here? I mean, potentially in tournaments. I mean, you had mentioned Taj earlier, Justin. I mean, is he interesting at all at this? He's sort of at an interesting price point. He's 200 less than Keith on FanDuel, and presumably, if Marvin can't go, people are going to jump down to Frank at 4. So Taj is sort of that weird where you might want to pay up for one of these other guys in the 8 range with Blake or Dre, or even get up to AD, or just pay two more for Markieff or go down to Frank. So
I think because of that reason, it makes Taj a very intriguing tournament play because everybody's going to be on Markieff for 200 more. You just pay up a little bit more for Markieff, and he's obviously the better play today. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying in terms of ownership, in terms of people who have Taj, it's not going to be a lot. And there's similar price points. You can have a really good tournament team where you could kind of play like your cash game plays and then just switch out Markieff for Taj. And then it's basically the same roster, but you're going to have a guy in Taj who's going to be very severely underowned. So I think that's an interesting strategy to employ. Other than that, I think, I don't really see anybody popping too high. John Lure is another guy that's destined to
fall on
it.
Power forward's been tough this year, man. It really has. Power forward's been brutal. I was writing yesterday that out of all the power forwards yesterday, Patrick Patterson was the only power forward at like 3K projected for at least 30 minutes. It's just been brutal.
I think that was only because Valanciunas got scratched.
Yeah. But I'm saying literally out of all the other power forwards, no one was projected for 30 minutes. It was so tough. Yeah.
That's something with Taj where the pivot there I like in theory, but I just kind of question his upside. He's not going big minutes, and Taj doesn't really have the game to put up like a monster line.
Yeah.
So I'd go lighter on him today. Taj for me is always a cash game play or not a play really.
Yeah.
And especially at that price. Probably one of my favorite tournament plays power forward is Draymond, and that's a spot where you're hoping the starters play 4 quarters. So if you're playing Draymond, you probably another good tournament play is Tim Frazier. You want to link these guys together, getting that game script in your head of, okay, if this happens, who's going to benefit the most? If you say if this game is within 10 throughout the whole game, starters play the 4th, then you can load up on a few of these guys in tournaments.
Draymond should play a lot today too because I imagine both teams are going to go smaller. Draymond's going to play center. Anthony Davis is going to play center. Then they're going to have Terrence Jones, which is KD at the power forward spot. So this kind of fits well to where Zaza doesn't play much at all, and Draymond gets the majority of the first unit minutes at center with the other starters.
So Vucevic is questionable.
Yeah, he's questionable. Yeah. I was going to get that. Yeah.
Cool. So just some quick data from our trends tool. The Orlando Magic have been the worst team against power forwards this year. They've allowed 5 points over expectations. So if you want to get on board for the Taj play, there's your data to back that up. So I think he's really intriguing for that reason. Interestingly, Golden State is right below them at 3.8 points over expectations. So another bump up for AD. So some AD Taj combo on FanDuel for all the tournament monies is sort of where I'm looking at here. So cool. Let's finish on center and then we'll wrap this pod up. So Justin, I'll start with you this time. It seems like, Joel is the guy to go to. I mean, you just look at some of these guys, it's not a bad center slate. We have Whiteside, Drummond, Jordan, Miles Turner. We have some guys that have a lot of skill, but they're all sort of facing each other in tough matchups with low total games. Embiid, is just sort of the lowest priced guy out of all of those. We talked about Gortat, so is Embiid your guy on FanDuel right now?
Yeah, Embiid's my guy. He's third in the league in usage rate. So he's out there gunning, man. He's playing like he knows he's on a min restriction, and he knows that he's only going to get to play 24 minutes. He's playing like it's amazing. He's really, really good. I mean, Jay talked about top 5, and he was joking, but like
no, I wasn't.
Oh.
I really wasn't.
Yeah, Jay doesn't joke about Joel Embiid.
No, he's per 36 or 30 points, 10 rebounds, 2.5 dimes, 5 blocks.
Let's see
usage rate.
Stretched out a little bit more before we get.
So the thing with me is going against Gobert, and it's worrying. So I'll ask a question. Let's hypothetically assume that Vooch is out and you have Biyombo at cheaper. Biyombo's my man. That's a guy I like a lot. Are you going to pivot off Embiid in any regard if Biyombo's there?
It depends on the roster construction, man. I'm going to play around with it and see what a Biyombo lineup looks like. This Vooch injury doesn't sound too serious. It's a strained shoulder, and there hasn't been any real mention of it from beat writers at all. It just kind of popped up randomly on this injury report that the Magic just sent out. So I would say he's probably 65% to play. But if he doesn't play, Biyombo.
I think he's the guy. It's tough, yeah. I mean, on DK for sure, you can look at it harder where Embiid isn't 5K. But yeah, I'm with you guys too. I think you ride the Embiid train on FanDuel still at 5K. Although this is definitely the toughest matchup he's had so far.
Yeah, I mean, per Trinsel, again, the Jazz have been the best team against centers. They've held them to 4.3 points below expectations on the year. So I mean, this is a brutal matchup for sure. But I think the question is, does it matter for Embiid? I mean, if he's 5K and going to have a 40% usage rate, does it even matter whether he's inefficient? Which he hasn't been against anyone, even against good teams, So
yeah,
I think that's sort of the question. But what are your thoughts on Bismack, Justin?
Yeah, I'm good with it. Going back to Embiid, I think he's kind of proven that given his usage rate, he's sort of matchup proof. He's going to take a lot of shots no matter what. And I don't think they're going to stop feeding him. And this kind of slower paced game where they can kind of feed him more in the post, and it's not as up tempo. I don't mind it too much. So Embiid's still my guy. I want to talk about Hassan Whiteside. I think he's the other guy that's probably going to get overlooked, especially on FanDuel. DK, I think he's right up there with some of the best plays on the slate. He's just been dominant when he's been on the floor. The only concern with him ever is just foul trouble. Otherwise, he just crushes when he's out there per minute. So it's Hassan and Embiid and Biyombo if Vooch ends up missing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. If you look at our, we have projected ownership on FanDuel. We'll have DraftKings coming soon, so stay tuned on that. But if we look at FanDuel, Embiid is the highest projected ownership at 9 to 12%. And so all of these other guys, I mean, you're talking Whiteside, Drummond, Jordan, Gobert, or Ty. These are all guys that are going to be in the 5-ish percent ownership range, at least that we're projecting. So definitely intriguing there. When are you going to get Whiteside and Drummond, these guys at lower ownership? probably not very often, but it's, on FanDuel especially, where you can only roster one center, people are just going to gravitate towards Embiid quite a bit. So out of these top guys, Jay, and we'll end it after this, Whiteside, Drummond, Jordan, these high-price studs with high ceilings, who's your favorite of the group?
I think I got to go with Whiteside for tournaments, because the massive upside here is if Adams gets in foul trouble early. And if he gets in foul trouble early, it's a wrap.
And some bonus.
Yeah, it's done. I mean, Whiteside's just going to feast if he gets Adams in foul trouble early, which is certainly possible here. So in cash, you look at it as more of this is a really difficult matchup. If Biombo's available or Embiid on FanDuel, you have guys to pivot from where you don't need Whiteside cash. But as a tournament play, he's probably the guy I like the most. You look at his ceiling comparison to these other guys. And then going back to Gortat, I think is a very interesting tournament play, especially as a pivot to the other four starters who are probably going to carry pretty high ownership. So, I think you make a case for a lot of these guys. Gobert, it's tough. His usage has been incredibly low. Third game in 4 nights. It's not a spot I'm looking at a massive ceiling from him. You look at Capella, his minutes are horrible. So it's kind of tough. You kind of weed out some of these guys as you go down. The Drummond DeAndre is probably the most intriguing matchup for me. I would kind of like a side on that, and then maybe attack that side. Like go a lot of Andre Drummond. We've seen his upside obviously this year too. So
we've seen that ceiling from Drummond. Jordan's been suspect. I don't think he's been that good overall in general. One last thing I'll add on Whiteside, which is why I like him even more. I talked about foul trouble being his biggest issue, biggest concern. Opposing centers averaged just 3.3 fouls per 36 last season against Steven Adams. So Steven Adams does not put guys in foul trouble, which is obviously good for Whiteside, which for me makes him a clear favorite beyond Embiid and potentially Biombo if Vooch is out.
Fair enough. Okay. We will end it there. Everyone, thanks for listening. This was definitely fun. We're not exactly sure how often we're going to do these, but they're going to be as often as our time allows. So we'll get them as often as we can. But thanks for listening. Thanks for the feedback on getting these back up. We're definitely excited to do these for sure. You can, again, send us any thoughts, feedback, FantasyLabs NBA Twitter account. You can podcast FantasyLabs. We're our individual Twitter handles. I'm at Bryan_Mears. Jay is at Doppelsykes with a Y. And then Justin is at Jay Phan. So tweet at us, give us any thoughts. Any last thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I think next time we take a hiatus, we should hit up Westworld, go there for a little trip.
Yes, agreed. Westworld, what a show, what a show. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. Good luck tonight in tournaments, and we'll talk to you guys pretty soon.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck, guys.